Welcome inside another edition of Mic Drop here, made possible by the Believe Network, available everywhere you get your podcasts and Sirius XM. I am, as always, Mike Asti, and maybe this is just being a baseball Hall of Fame nerd, but this is my favorite time of year. This is one of my favorite time of year. At least you get the ballot months ago, and then you get the announcement, and we are now talking after the announcement, the day after the announcement, of who will be enshrined in Cooperstown. And a lot of controversy is always involved in who's going to be enshrined in Cooperstown. It's probably the most controversial Hall of Fame selection every single year. It is also, for my money, the most hallowed Hall of Fame for sure. A lot of the other ones have been watered down. Some believe this one maybe has, but there's something special about the Baseball Hall of Fame. I've been there numerous times, and there's just something different about it than the others. But I enjoy this. I enjoy this conversation. I enjoy digging in, especially with Baseball Hall of Fame voters. I am not one. Will Graves, who has been on this show in the past, talked to us after the ballot was released, and he told us who he was voting for. We've talked to him a myriad of times, but I wanted to get somebody else on, get their perspective on, and it is a friend and colleague, John Perrotto, who has been a longtime baseball writer, and that is really an understatement. How many years there, John? 30 plus, I know, at least.
If I do it this year, it'll be my 39th.
Yeah. 39. So you got to get to an even 40. You have to get to an even 40 for me. So not to date him, but John has been doing this longer than I've been alive, and to much success for sure. A longtime Baseball Hall of Fame voter. I believe you said 98 was your first year voting, correct? Yes.
1998.
And currently writes for a myriad of outlets, but a longtime baseball writer. And somebody that certainly is tapped into the baseball community, and that, again, is an understatement. So, John, happy to have you on. A little different ballot than Will for sure, so I wanted to get a different perspective on now that we have the announcement of Carlos Beltran, Andrew Jones joining Jeff Kent, and it's going to be a smaller class this year. We'll see what future classes look like. I kind of think that future ones might open up a little bit, but a smaller class this year. But I saw on your ballot, John, that not only do you have these two guys, you have a lot of other candidates that you voted for. And as I brought up with Will and others, your ballot is, I guess, friendlier and more vast than some others. So obviously there are some tightening in on who they want to vote for. We'll get into the whole PED issue. You're willing to vote for a myriad of players, and you did detail it a little bit on a recent Yardbarker article. But right now, before we fully get into your full ballot, why for you does Carlos Beltran, Andrew Jones both belong in Cooperstown? And then just as you're giving us thoughts on those two, what are your thoughts on Jeff Kent getting the nod from a different set? It's not from the voters. I know probably you would have voted for others and probably have voted for others that were in that room as well based on your overall ballot, but Jeff Kent gets the nod and nobody else does from that extra committee.
Okay, well, I'll start with Jeff Kent. I'll start from the bottom.
Sure.
Jeff Kent was on the ballot at a time when there was a backlog of candidates. If you recall, there were a few years where either zero or one person got elected because of the steroid guys, the PED guys, whatever you want to call them. And I think Jeff Kent would have gotten higher vote totals, but at the time there were probably 15 or 16 guys on the ballot that you could have made a strong case for the Hall of Fame. You can only vote for 10, and that happened in my case. I thought, he was worthy of my vote, but there were other guys who were more worthy of the vote, and he ended up, and it's really the only time in the 28 years that I've voted for the Hall of Fame, there was about a 3-year stretch there where we're actually got to the point where I had more people I wanted to vote for than ballot spaces. And I think that's where he kind of got backlogged. And to be totally honest, he was kind of a prick to deal with.
I've heard that for sure.
He was not a very nice man. And I'm not saying you lay out the red carpet if someone comes to your locker, but at least treat him with a little bit of respect and dignity, which he didn't do most of the time. He was hard to deal with. And I don't take that into account, but I know some voters do.
Some do. And we see that across Hall of Fames, but certainly the Baseball Hall of Fame. Some do. Yeah.
But he definitely hurt himself by, he just was was condescending and he wasn't a very nice man.
Yeah, but you have no problem with him getting the nod.
But he was a great player. He's one of the best second basemen in baseball history. So I voted for him, and I would have voted for him even more often if there wasn't that backlog there and that span for about a 3-4 year span. As far as Carlos Beltran, to me, since he came onto the ballot, I guess this was his 4th year of eligibility. I voted for him every time. I know some people, hold the sign stealing scandal in Houston in 2017 against him. But, here's a guy with 400 homers, 300 stolen bases, over 2,000 hits. Really good player. And, I do take postseason into account. And I mean, the postseason he had, you look at what he did in his career in the postseason was outstanding, but especially 2004 with Houston, where he homered in 5 straight games in the NLCS against St. Louis, even though the Astros did wind up losing that series. I mean, it was one of the best postseason series ever. And Andrew Jones is funny, he got 7% of the vote his first time on the ballot and didn't make it to his ninth time. I wasn't the one that voted for him right away either. And I think
that's interesting.
And here's why, because
you did vote for Beltran right away, and some do believe, and I've even argued this, that they are very similar. So it's hard to vote for one and not the other, but you did that.
But I think the thing with Beltran, I looked at his body of work and it was more consistent. And I kind of looked at the Hall of Fame as a career achievement award too, just not being good for 5 years. And I know some people look the other way and say, well, whatever his best peak was, that's what I'm going to base my vote on. Sure. And, let's be honest, Andrew Jones's career went off a cliff after he left the Atlanta Braves. I mean, he went from being a Hall of Fame caliber player to barely a league average player in a hurry. And I'll be honest, that was still my initial thought of him when he first came on the ballot. It's like, this guy really wasn't very good the second half of his career. But then the more, and that's why guys are
it's not just 1 year. People think of it as just 1 year. It was like 4 or 5 years that he was atrocious. And he had a big contract. I know actually there was a voter that said that, and this is just our principle, and I know you don't go to the morality as much, but there was a voter that admitted that part of why he held back his Andrew Jones vote was not even so much that he dipped at the end of his career, because a lot of Hall of Famers have had rough final 4 or 5 years, but the fact that he was, in that Hall of Fame voter's mind, stealing money. That he claimed that Andrew Jones had a mega contract that he was sucking on, whereas other stars usually are on lesser deals in their last couple of years. But Andrew Jones was getting mega money, and he didn't feel the effort was even there from Andrew Jones after a while. That's his opinion. But Andrew Jones eventually gets in for the pre Dodgers end of his career, mostly for the Atlanta Brave work, and did have 10 Gold Gloves, did have 400 plus home runs. You mentioned the postseason moments, did have that 19-year-old rookie moment in a World Series during that Braves run that is still in World Series lore forever. So that period eventually gets him in, but the end there was odd. And I guess so that's interesting. So it is, sometimes it does stick in your mind on how a guy ends his career, because overall numbers wise, whether you're going to the counting numbers or the metrics, him and Beltran do have very similar numbers, but Beltran was consistent. More so, at least.
And I think that's a good reason why players are on the ballot for 10 years, if they get at least 5% of the vote. And I used to, when I first started voting, I mean, it was a long time ago, and I, was younger and, a little more set in my ways. And I always thought, if a guy isn't a Hall of Famer the day he retires, what's going to change?
Heard that.
But then you start to realize as you get older, and especially with a lot more of the advanced metrics and things that weren't in existence in 1998 when I started, it really really puts guys in a different light. And I think the further removed Andrew Jones was from the end of that bad ending to his career, the more I realized, hey, this guy was really a heck of a player for 10 years there in Atlanta, 8-10 years. And
that's a long time.
You just ran down his stats and his Gold Gloves. And I mean, it changed. And I've found that more and more as I've gotten older, kind of in time, you start to look at people in a little bit different lens. And again, especially today with so many different ways you can measure players that you couldn't like almost 30 years ago. And
Yeah,
the
100%.
more I thought about it, the more I voted for him probably the last 3 years at
I was going to
least.
ask how many years. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's also interesting, kind of what you're saying, it's also leading to a difference on how the current game is voted on and the players of today are voted on for awards, and then that will eventually pad their resume for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
You mentioned the metrics and the analytics. I mean, we're in Pittsburgh. You covered the Pirates for a very, very long time. Paul Skeens, a deserving Cy Young winner, but in 1998, with this resume, he wouldn't have won the award. He just wouldn't have won it. He just wouldn't have won it with that low win total, before metrics, before analytics, before really diving into how the pitcher is performing separate from the team. Whether it would have been fair or not, he wouldn't have won it. And Felix Hernandez, who is on this ballot, got a little bit more votes than I would have thought he would get, but I don't mind him getting some votes because he once won a Cy Young Award with 13 wins, and CeCe Sabathia didn't with 20 wins in that same season. And in the past, even 5-6 years earlier than that happened, CeCe, the 20-game winner on the Yankees, would have walked away with it, but the analytics awarded it to Felix Hernandez, who now maybe eventually will get in the Hall of Fame because of that. So it's all trickling down to even how people are voted on in the current game, and that eventually gets to your resume into the Hall of Fame. But it is interesting because that's also part of why you have what was the Veterans Committee and now going into the golden era and the modern day players. And that's why you have how Jeff Kent got in. That's why you have that room, that it sometimes corrects the wrongs that you're saying, that Jeff Kent, power wise, I mean, people can say what they want about defense. That's, some like it, some don't from him, but offensively, one of the greatest offensive second basemen of all time, certainly home run wise, you could argue being the best. The numbers and the total says he was, and he eventually now gets in. But he was getting pedestrian votes for a guy that has that honor because of whether it's that he wasn't a nice guy or because there were just people that didn't mind the steroid issue were choosing between him and Bonds maybe and wanted to give the Bonds the vote. And that log jammed it, but then it corrected with Jeff Kent getting in. And I do want to get John Perrotto here joining me on Mic Drop with Believe and Sirius XM, Mike Asti, as we were talking Baseball Hall of Fame, the recent news of Beltran and Andrew Jones joining Jeff Kent, the smaller class this year, and then the rest of John's ballot, which is a big ballot maybe in comparison to others. Before we fully get into the steroid guys, though, I do also want to ask, and I kind of know the answer because of how your vote went and what you've said about the steroid issue, but maybe even separate from Bond, because I would assume that you would want him and Clemens to be in based on your overall ballot. Was there anybody else that you thought should have been put in there with Jeff Kent? Because there's no rule that it has to be one guy in terms of that room, those 15 voters. Some thought maybe Don Mattingly should get the nod and that others should get the nod, separate from even the steroid guys. But their vote totals weren't that great. I mean, it really was Jeff Kent running away with that, and he ended up being the guy. Was there anybody else in there, even separate from the steroid guys, that you think should have joined Jeff Kent?
Yeah, two guys you just mentioned, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. I mean,
okay,
you can
those
talk
two?
About the steroids. Okay. You can talk, about everything, and I understand that point of view. I really do, and I know, quite a few people wouldn't vote for either one of them, but I don't know how you can erase history. I mean, Barry Bonds hit 762 home runs, whether you liked the guy, whether you didn't.
Sure.
He never failed a steroid test. So, I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but he still hit 762 home runs, the most anybody's ever hit. Roger Clemens won 355 games and won 7 Cy Young awards, and you can't, or 8 Cy Young awards, and you can't just say he wasn't one of the greatest pitchers in baseball history. And that's how I look at it. I mean, how do we know if the modern guys from the 80s, 90s, this century didn't use steroids too? I mean, everyone.
I think there's guys in the Hall of Fame now that use steroids. I mean,
I'm not going to accuse Frank Thomas of being a steroid user because there's no proof. But here's a guy that's on TV selling basically synthetic steroids.
Oh, wow, sure. Yeah.
And he went in, his campaign was always, well, he was clean. He hit his 500 home runs because he was clean. Was he? I don't know. If he was, why is he selling this stuff on TV now? I don't know.
I mean,
You know,
Jose Canseco has flat implicated guys that are in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I'll say it because he said it. He's flat out said that he has said, if you read Game of Shadows, if you read Juiced from Jose Canseco, he has said that Pudge Rodriguez, a former teammate of his, that he according to Jose Canseco, he's seen Pudge Rodriguez do steroids. He also implicated Mike Piazza, who got in with Ken Griffey Jr., who is the king of being all natural. So those are just two guys that are in the Hall of Fame that Jose Canseco, who, you know, for the weird comparison, if you want to talk about, you know, people that maybe no one likes Jose Canseco, but if you want to talk about people that know who did steroids or not, he probably knows more than anybody else, whether you like the man or not, on who did steroids or not. And those are two that he implicated that are in, and no one's going to be taken out. There's other issues with guys that are in. We'll get to more of that in a moment, though. But what I wanted to ask, and I figured you would think those two should be in for sure based on your ballot, but I wanted to ask about kind of the rest from that committee. And now you mentioned Clemens and Bonds. To throw another steroid guy in there that was on that, was a part of that, was on that group. Gary Sheffield does have 500 plus home runs, was involved in a world championship team, does have high batting averages way back, and did it with myriad of teams and all-stars, etc. He was somebody that was also being discussed. He did not get it. But even separate from the steroid guys, you have Don Mattingly, you have even a few others that some thought, Don Mattingly in particular was one that people thought maybe should finally get in. He doesn't have a steroid cloud. He just didn't get in. His career, you know, kind of was in that middle period where it was right after the Yankees went to a World Series. It was right before they embarked on a dynasty. He only had the one postseason series, and it was a loss. He was an MVP. He was a solid player, but the numbers weren't exactly as gaudy as maybe some would enjoy. He doesn't get in. What are your thoughts on the non-steroid guys? Maybe you can include Sheffield here about not getting in, separate from Bonds and Clemens from that group. Sheffield, Mattingly. Would you have put anybody else in?
Well, I tell you what, I like Don Mattingly, and he's a friend of mine. I've known Don for a long time. Done a lot of stories on him over the years, not necessarily here in Pittsburgh, but for national outlets. And I look at his career, and I mean, he was on that way to being a Hall of Famer, and unfortunately, you know, he had the back injury, and you look at his overall numbers, and they probably are a little short. But again, it's another guy who was on the ballot before you had a lot of these different metrics. And if he came back on the ballot now, I might be more apt to vote for him than I would have before, where you look mainly just at what the final numbers were. And, you know, Steve Garvey's another guy, and that he wasn't on the you know, on the ballot here with the old timers committee, the era committee, but he's a guy now in retrospect who you probably say, hey, maybe I should have voted for him when he was on the ballot. So, you know, it's sad, you know, and another guy on that ballot, and it's amazing to think about in retrospect, is Carlos Delgado.
I was going to bring him up. Yeah.
He didn't get 5% of the vote his first year on the ballot, which you need to do to stay on the ballot. He dropped on the writer's ballot. Let me make this clear, since we're talking about two different, committees here. How did he only get less than 5% of the vote? I mean, I don't.
You want another one that baffles me? And I think this is going to be a major barometer on how Andrew McCutchen does maybe in the future, comparing his resume. And I know there's personal issues. Jim Edmonds got 2.5%.
Yeah.
2. I'm not saying he necessarily has to be in, but that percentage is insanely low.
Yeah.
That is really low.
Yeah.
2.5%.
Yeah.
It's almost not even worth putting his name on there. You almost wasted his time.
Yeah.
I you know, he was a tabloid star at the end of his career. You know, people have their opinions on, you know, affairs and things like that in his personal life, but 2.5%, 8 Gold Gloves, all the World Series moments, 300 plus home runs. Didn't get to 500, of course. Yeah, there was a logjam of great center fielders during his era, and I could see an argument of Hall of Very Good, maybe. I could see even for Delgado, Hall of Very Good. But 5 and 2.5% seems low, even if they don't get to 75%.
Yeah.
I mean, Jim Edmonds can't even get on this he can't even get on the old timers. Like he's just done.
Yeah.
and that is a wild low percentage. And that's one that I don't know. I've never heard anyone have an answer for on why his percentage is so low. It's just they don't like him, I guess.
Well, he was another guy who did not curry favor with reporters. I just didn't think he was a Hall of Famer at the time.
Okay.
That's why
fair.
I didn't vote for him, and I'm not sure he still is. But, you talk about that, and you look at last night's results, and I mean, I know he was this, he got busted for steroids, but Ryan Braun only got 3% of the vote. And here's a guy who
I want to get to Braun with you. I want to get to Will Graves actually asked me to ask you about Ryan Braun.
Yeah.
By the way, again, John Perrotto here, Mike Drop, Mike Asti here. We're talking the Baseball Hall of Fame with a longtime Baseball Hall of Fame voter since '98. John's been voting in this, and I know you take it seriously, even though people maybe will agree, disagree. I don't fully agree with your ballot, but I know you take it very, very seriously, and that's the most important thing I will say. So I kind of want to ask you this before we fully get into your ballot here, which will include, you gave it away, you voted for Ryan Braun. We'll go into that. I want to ask your opinions here on maybe how this is all handled, and if there's any fixes, or you don't got to throw any names out there of any of your colleagues or anyone who's voters, but if this should be the way it is for the rest of time. And where I'm kind of going with that is, number one, we've seen voters admit kind of to casting ballots that aren't really in earnest. I mean, Dan Lebitard is famous for this years ago, and I believe he got his vote taken away where he publicly
tried to sell it.
Yeah, he tried to sell it. And then he admitted later on that he was making a mockery of his vote because of steroids. And he wanted to vote for all the steroid guys. So he basically intentionally made a mockery. He had his vote taken away. And so that can be done. We've also seen other longtime baseball writers keep voting. And you're mentioning that maybe you would retire here coming up. I mean, you've been doing this a long, long time. Everyone respects you in the area, or should, at least I do. But there are people that haven't written a baseball article in years and years and years that are continuing to vote. Separate from that, there are people that, and kind of admitted to the issue that you alluded to earlier, that didn't vote for slam dunk guys and then said it was because of a log jam. Like Ken Griffey Jr. had 3 people not vote for him. 2 people admitted to doing so. And then there was another that we still don't know. But one person literally said that he didn't think Griffey needed his vote, so he just didn't vote for him. He knew he was going to get it anyway. Didn't think he needed his vote.
I don't mean to interrupt, but that line of thinking drives me insane. But
anyway, okay, well that's
programming. Throw that in there.
No, well there you go. Well, I'm just saying, especially because unlike the other Hall of Fames, and it shouldn't be this way, maybe, but your percentage does matter. I mean, Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, you name it, Joe DiMaggio, they didn't get 100% of the vote. 100% of the vote didn't happen to Mariano Rivera. Many thought it would be Griffey because despite getting hurt a lot, his overall numbers were there. He did a lot in his prime. He has the peak time, whether in analytics or counting numbers, and he doesn't have a steroid cloud. But yet 3 people still didn't vote for the man. And one of them said Griffey didn't need his vote. So I guess we can start right there. Is there a fix? Is there anything when something like that is admitted that you want to see done to people who admit these things? Is that something you have a problem with, that if somebody would say, well, I'm not voting for somebody because they don't need my vote? Do you care about percentages people get even? Because Will did even mention to me that there are some guys that he thinks is a Hall of Famer, but he doesn't want to give them the honor of a potential high percentage. So he does consider not voting for them and making them go below the 90% threshold when he talks to his colleagues that are going to vote for him. He maybe says, I want that guy to dip down. What are your thoughts on even that mentality? I mean, that was a big deal during the Griffey year that somebody did say they think he's a Hall of Famer, but didn't vote for him because he didn't need his vote.
To be quite candid here, I'm going to be, I don't care what anybody else thinks I should vote for, who they think I should. It's my ballot.
Sure, it's your vote.
I mean, I don't,
100%.
And I'd like to think at this stage of my career that I've covered all these guys. I've actually personally know a
No,
number of guys.
Your ballot's legit. You're legit to
Yeah.
vote for sure.
My problem is there are too many people voting on baseball that do not cover baseball regularly.
Okay.
And I'm not saying you have to be at the ballpark every day of the year,
Sure,
or that
sure.
you have to go to the winter meetings or the GM meetings. But there are some people voting who, and a lot of these are columnists, and
Yeah.
I mean, they're
Because if
like
you're a columnist, you're not a
baseball.
beat writer. You don't need
Yeah.
to be there every day, right?
No, but you should at
You're not
least show up
reporting.
a couple
Sure.
times a year. I mean, there are people
Sure.
who voted seriously. There
Sure.
are people who voted, and I'm not going to call out names. I'm not going to do that, but I think people can kind of figure this out if they read the newspapers or what have you. There are a couple voters, active sports writers, who have votes in the Pittsburgh chapter who didn't show up at the ballpark one time the entire year. Now, I'm not saying you got to be there for X amount of games, a certain percentage of games, but how do those people still have a Hall of Fame vote? And the other thing is 10 years after you get, if you have 10 full years, consecutive years in the association, you get a vote.
Right.
Okay. I still think there should be a screening committee because there are too many people who are able to get into the BBWAA, like columnists and what have you, that really don't cover baseball. And I just,
that's fair. You could argue. It's harder to get It's hard to get into that than say the pro football writers or the basketball writers. I'm in those. But it's hard. It's hard. The baseball writers is still a select group, and I do know, and you probably know this, that the Pirates only even give parking spots to people in the BBWA. You don't even if you're covering the game, but you're not in the group, then you don't get parking covered. So it's tighter than in the other sports, but maybe you need to be tighter, even tighter than it is.
I will make this point. I covered 2 Super Bowls. That does not qualify me to be a Pro Football Hall of Fame voter.
Sure.
And would I ever for a minute suggest that I should be on that panel, 50 people who select the Hall of Fame?
Right.
And if I've covered more Super Bowls than certain baseball voters have went to the ballpark in a year, I mean, what does that say? And again, some of these people are friends, but I'm sorry. The bottom line, and I think, okay, I understand the 10 years after you're out of the BBWAA, you can still vote. I would like that tightened up too.
I was going to ask.
Okay, I covered high school football for years in Beaver County. I worked at the Beaver County Times for 26 years. And part of Miami, we were a smaller paper. Everybody covered high school football. It didn't matter if you were a beat guy on the pro beat or you were the youngest guy taking the box scores over the phone. Everybody chipped in. I haven't covered a high school football game in Beaver County for a newspaper for way past 10 years. And even 5 years after the last time I covered a game, I couldn't tell you what was going on with all the teams in Beaver County and the area that we covered, our newspaper. So I really wonder if you have somebody that's a Hall of Fame voter and they've gone on to cover basketball or they've retired, how closely they are in tune with baseball anymore. And I just think there's too many voters. And I like the 75% idea because you really have to earn it to get in as a player. You have to get 75% of the vote.
It can't be lower than that, right?
But I just question if I would love to break it. I wish there was a way you could break this voting down between people who are right now actively covering baseball and people who don't actively cover baseball. See what the percentages are on some of these guys. It would really be fascinating for me to see what exactly.
And that's the thing that you mentioned 50 people voting on the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It is easier to get into the Pro Football writers, but it is harder to be part of that Hall of Fame committee. That is very, 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 very tight. Same thing with even in other sports. But for baseball, the 10 years in baseball writers gets you on, and then there might be diligent voters who are there that are doing their job.
There are.
It does not feel like you need almost 300 people to be voting in this. The other sports do not have close to that number. And part of it is, as you're mentioning, there are many people who are retired who have continue to vote, and maybe they're doing their research, in Florida at the beach. Could be, but the baseball, that's why Dan Le Batard's so insane. The Baseball Writers Committee, once you get a vote, as long as you keep voting, you really got to do something to lose that vote.
Yeah.
So, and you almost got to be like Dan Le Batard was literally like begging to lose it. He was publicly saying, I don't want this. Unless that is what you're doing and you just happen to stop covering and you vote and you never go to a game, you're going to keep that vote no matter what your age is, no matter what you're doing in or out of media. You could be retired. So do you maybe want a screening process after a certain amount of time, or I don't know how to whittle that down, but we don't need that number. If that means 100 people drop off their vote and now we only have 150, that's not really a problem for me. I don't think you need as many voters as you have.
No, I don't either. And I think, again, it's kind of a slippery slope, but where do you draw the line? Where do you cut off the line? And, it's interesting. And I know that maybe if I were a columnist, I would think this the other way. If I weren't at the ballpark regularly, if I weren't talking to people baseball regularly, if I had, because
that's a promoted job.
I'm the point of my career. Everybody on the ballot, I was an active baseball writer when they played. Now I understand if you've only been in the organization 10 years. I mean, when I started, there were people on the ballot who I remember watching as a kid. Like Dick Allen will be an example. I mean, Dick Allen's from my neck of the woods. He grew up in Waupun. I live in Beaver Falls. And I mean, I was biased toward Dick Allen. He was one of my heroes when I was a kid. He was a local guy, and he was the MVP of the American League. You have voters now who weren't actively covering baseball when these guys were playing. And I realize there's not a way around that. But
younger people who earn it have to get it.
It does change your perspective from when I started voting. They went from like kind of mythical figures on a baseball card or on the game of the week on NBC to like these are real live people that I saw play in person and talk to, and it really changes your vote. Now, I'm not saying everybody should have to be a 25-year member of the BBWA to have a vote, but I do think there needs to be a way that even if it's a 10-year voter, they should at least be around the ballpark now and again and have an active role. And again, I'm not suggesting you got to write 500 stories a month on baseball or something like that, but at least be in tune with the game a little bit.
There could be something. I mean, honestly, it could be as simple as putting a barcode on your writer's card, and you have to scan it when you go in. And if you don't have more than 5 scans, you haven't been there more than 5 times. And then, it could even be as simple as, because everyone has health issues and things go on in their life, that if you don't get 5, that maybe there's a meeting with you and you have to give your reasoning on why you weren't there. And it could be that, my wife was sick, and that's legit. Or it could be, I didn't feel like going. And if you give the I don't feel like going, then maybe there's another committee that, if he need to still vote. Like, I mean, so that wouldn't be that wild or impossible to do. There are ways to get around this. And I do think it'd be fine if you whittle down the voting pool, and the 75% bar has to stay there. But I mean, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that most people do their due diligence. But we also even had somebody in this cycle literally just vote for people that he covered. No one else. So as much as it's great to vote for people that you covered, that's the other way. That it can't only be that. Like you can't be only voting for people that you cover, because say if you're a member of Philadelphia media and cover the Phillies and you didn't happen to cover everybody and you're younger or whatever, you didn't get to road games or you missed some guys, it doesn't mean you can't only cover your beat too. It has to marry together. Right. But that occurred. Most people do not do that. But I mean, those rare examples that are put out publicly, there's egregious errors that go on. Like if somebody publicly says, I'm only voting for people that I cover, there should be a way around, okay, you're done. Like, what are you doing? But those things continue on, and this is going to keep on continuing on, because as we stand now, unless you pretty much beg for your vote to be taken away, it will remain. John Perrotto, Mike Asti here on Mic Drop with Believe and Sirius XM. John, I do want to get into your ballot. For this year. And of course, as we mentioned at the top of the show, Carlos Beltran, Andrew Jones, very two similar, great defensive, also offense for sure, playoff moment guys. Jeff Kent joins them as the greatest power hitting second baseman after not getting votes by the writers, but eventually now will get enshrined. It's a smaller class this year. But if it was up to John Perrotto, it would not have been a smaller class. I want to kind of go down this a little bit here, and I'm going to pick out some guys that I think are probably controversial, maybe. And we're going to talk the steroid guys, but I'm going to put a pin in them and leave them be for a moment. So one guy that is very controversial now, and you mentioned that there are certain guys that get maybe more love or should get more love because now we're in an analytic age where they wouldn't have got votes in the past. And one of those guys that really stands out to kind of fit that bill maybe for some is Bobby Abreu. If we're talking in the 90s, he probably wouldn't be getting any kind of love on any kind of ballot.
No.
However, you voted for him, and I don't know if he's ever going to get there. However, he did better than I would have thought maybe in terms of his total. And there are some that he got 30.8%, not nearly 75%. We'll see how he does. 7th year on the ballot, 131 total votes. You could argue maybe he even deserves a lot more and deserves many more votes. There are some that think that maybe he doesn't deserve that many. Part of his argument is that, yeah, there's some power. No, he was never the best player in the game, only the 2 All-Star appearances, but 400 plus steals. He was an all-around player, even if maybe people who are casual fans or just know the big names wouldn't have thought of him in an era that was really, really crowded. So what is your case for Bobby Abreu? Because he got some votes, maybe more than some would have thought, but not nearly enough to really knock at the door of Cooperstown.
I changed my mind on him when he first came on the ballot. Really, literally the first thing that goes through your head before any research, before anything, your first thought, at least mine, and I can't speak this for every Hall of Fame voter,
right?
Is he a Hall of Famer? That's the very, very first thing you think of when you read, especially when guys are on the ballot for the first time. Like for example, like Nick Markakis, who was a good player, but is he a Hall of Famer? No. And even after I dug into the numbers, it's like no. But with Abreu, the longer he was on the ballot, the more I thought about his career. And like you said, only 2 All-Star games. He never had that monster season, but boy. You look over his career, and he was really a good player for a long time. And for me, this is one where I don't need to put a qualifier on it. It's the Lifetime Achievement Award, in my estimation, for him. This guy, he had steady, be above average season.
Yeah.
And then when you look down after all the years he played, you said, you know what, this guy had an above average career. He might not have ever won an MVP, and he might never, generate a lot of headlines. But man, he did a lot of things and did a lot of things well. I will say it's one shining moment. I happened to be there in the 2005 All-Star game at Comerica Park in Detroit. And I'm not like, I certainly don't count the home run derby into my criteria for who's. It's just a fun exhibition. It really, to me, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, like assessment is going to get some votes for that, right? Yeah,
it's a fun thing, and I do. But that was quite the show he put on that Comerica Park. But again, it wasn't like he hit any 550-foot homers. It was like kind of the epitome of Bobby Abreu.
It makes you wish he would have been an all-star more than 2 times.
But it was just one after another after the consistency, I guess, is what I'm driving at here. Is it's sort of his biggest moment in the national spotlight was the consistency that he showed in that home run derby, and it kind of really encapsulates Bobby Abreu's career. And like I said, again, with more perspective and more time, and you tend to sometimes start to pour more emphasis on things than maybe I did 5 years ago.
Yeah, and that's fair, and that's probably why he is getting some votes now, even though, again, he's far from the 75% bar, only at 30.8%. But, a pro for him would be, and this is going back to more of the modern day thinking and even what you adjusted to, even though you've been doing this a very, very long time and, you've been around. His wins above replacement, his BWAR in terms of baseball
Yeah.
reference, which is cited a lot, is 60.2.
Yeah.
That is really good. And by the way, to make this clear, that is higher than some current Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
That is not a low number by any means. 60.2 again. Now, what counters him, which is a negative outside of just the 2 All-Star appearances, because that is opinion. So, say what you want about opinion. But 60.2 on wins above replacement. And by the way, again, to throw that out there, Andrew Jones is at 62.7. So very, very close. But a big difference that is an advantage for Andrew Jones, aside from all the Gold Gloves and the defensive metrics, and I think he's deserving and all the other numbers. 434 home runs for Andrew Jones, including the 5-year slide at the end of his career. Bobby Abreu, John, only hit 288 home runs. If we added the home run derby, he would barely get over 300.
Yeah.
Like his overall total was not that high. I believe he only had 230 home run seasons. That's manu a manu with the pitcher, and he's not able to do what normally an outfielder is expected to do in that era. So that definitely hurts him. But there's a pros and cons argument, and analytic wise, his wins above replacement is higher. And part of why is because Andrew Jones was really mostly a slugger and a great defensive player, maybe arguably the greatest defensive center fielder of all time, which is also part of how he gets in. But Bobby Abreu could steal some bases. I mean, that's not something that's going on for Andrew Jones. Only stole 152. Bobby Abreu, again, over 400. Over 400 stolen bases is a really high number for somebody that you wouldn't think of as a Hall of Famer. But again, Bobby Abreu, probably not ever going to get in. It'll be interesting how he'll then do on the Veterans Committees years later, and if he'll ever get revisited in that regard. Now, moving off of Bobby Abreu, who is one that certainly stands out, the previously mentioned Ryan Braun. Now, obviously, he's connected to steroid use, and that's a ding for people in general. But there is an argument with Ryan Braun that's separate from the steroid issue that we talked about with Bonds, Clemens, Sheffield, and others, that if there was no steroid issue, Bonds, Clemens, even Gary Sheffield over 500 home runs. I mean, hell, Sammy Sosa was 600 plus and 360 home run seasons. He would have got in. He's not even getting love now in general. Those guys would be in if there was no steroid issue, Clemens too, for a pitcher. But Ryan Braun, to me, John, even if you didn't care about steroids, would still be a borderline case. I mean, he does have an MVP to his credit. He doesn't have the mega numbers overall that maybe you would want. He does have some peak years, and you mentioned that sometimes it could be a full-on career lifetime achievement award for you, and doesn't have to just be off peak years. But his overall home run total is only 352, 1,154 RBI, so he's over 1,000, but that's lower than a lot of others that are actually even still getting snubbed. I mean, Abreu has more RBI than Ryan Braun right now. Again, he has the Rookie of the Year and the MVP, and does have a myriad of All-Star appearances, but the overall counting numbers aren't really there. His wins above replacement is at 47.2, so he's significantly lower than Abreu and others who are borderline guys. I know you did vote for Abreu. What is your case for Ryan Braun? Because for me, even if you take away steroids, he's still a borderline guy.
He is a borderline guy, and this is a case where I took peak into consideration more than anything. And here's another reason I voted for Ryan Braun, and it has nothing to do with his statistics. The Brewers were bad for a long time before he got there. They had 16 straight losing seasons. Them and the Pirates at the time were neck and neck. Well, they were even, and who was going to get the record for most consecutive losing seasons. And it was more than just Ryan. You can't attribute the whole turnaround to Ryan Braun, but there is certainly no doubt that he was the catalyst that turned that franchise around when they drafted him and he got to the big leagues fast, and he won MVP, I believe, in his third year in the league or second. And that's a case where I let some factors,
fifth year Rookie of the Year, and then fifth year MVP.
And that was kind of, and there's one where I don't want to say biased is not the right word, but I saw a lot of the Brewers being
fair.
Based in Pittsburgh, and at the time, they played the really unbalanced schedule even more than now, when the division teams would come to each other's cities 3 times a year. So I saw him a lot. I saw the impact he had. I talked to people in the front office, talked to people, the manager, Ned Yost, and then Craig Counsell, and they all said he was the guy. When they got Ryan Braun, he was the guy that was the difference maker. And I took that into account. Now, maybe if I were based in Minneapolis, where I didn't see him all the time, or
Yeah.
Seattle or Phoenix, maybe I wouldn't have looked at him in that way, and I wouldn't have had as much not inside knowledge, but insight, I guess, from what exactly he made to that franchise. And I knew I knew he was never going to get in, and
Okay.
but in my mind, what he did for Milwaukee counted. But I will say this: I am surprised that he fell off the ballot in 1 year. I thought he would garner a little more support than 5%. I didn't think he would get like 30 or 35, but I thought he would get some. And I know of my 10 votes, other than the steroid guys, that's the one that raised eyebrows. And I get it. I totally understand why people would say, "What was he thinking?" Voting for Braun, but that played a large part in my thinking. What he meant to that organization.
Yeah, if you don't mind a big Hall of Fame, I guess. And I do see your perspective, seeing him so much, so maybe it was tainted in that way. But yeah, you mentioned 3.5% for him, only 15 votes. So here on Mic Drop, we were talking to one of the 15 voters that voted for Ryan Braun. Only 15 total votes went Ryan Braun's way. And for me, I just can't get beyond the overall body of work. For me is not there. If we're going to just go to the peak, sure, you could argue that from that rookie of the year to the MVP, that 5-year stretch, he was maybe the best player in the game, or one of the best players in the game, and he was resurrecting a franchise that had been dormant for sure. And especially if you're going to vote for him for those awards at that time, you're saying that he's one of the best players in the game. But that's a really low home run total for me. The RBI total is not necessarily there in comparison to even guys who didn't get in terms of even his hit total. He's shy of even 2,000. If you care about any of those longevity and career achievement numbers, and again, some don't care about those things, but if you only care about the analytics, which I know there are some people who just care about the analytics, the 47.2 wins above replacement on Baseball Reference is below a Hall of Fame bar as well.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't care about the full-on body of work if the wins above replacement is way higher. But for me, I'd have less of a problem with Bobby Abreu getting there than Ryan Braun. And maybe it's because of the versatility, what Abreu could do as a stolen base threat as well. And then the WAR is just way higher. 47.2 to me is just a really low number. And yeah, he's off. We'll see if he's handled years from now. He's the Brewers can love him forever despite the steroid use. And then you add that to it and it just eliminates him. I do wonder what his percentage would be if there was no steroid accusations or steroid proof or steroid suspension or any of that marred his career. I still don't think he'd get in, but I imagine it'd be higher than 3.5%.
Oh, I knew, and it wasn't why I did it, but I knew that was going to be the one on my ballot that was going to raise more eyebrows, other than Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez.
Yeah,
they're sort of in a separate category. I am very curious when the voting, when the BBW or the Hall of Fame and the BBWA in conjunction put, and most of the writers will eventually post their ballot. I'll be curious to comb through those ballots and see who the other people that voted for him.
Who are your Braun guys? You guys need to meet once a year.
Yeah. Were they people in NL Central cities? Were they? Obviously.
Were they in Milwaukee?
Milwaukee would
right.
But were they from Cincinnati? Were they from Chicago? Were they from St. Louis? And I don't know. I'm really.
It almost
curious.
Would be more interesting if they weren't.
A wasted vote. He was number 10 of my 10.
Okay.
If I had to rank my guys 1 through 10, he would have been number 10. He was the last guy I voted for.
Yeah. To be fair, there's somebody that I'm going to offer to you at the end of this, after we do talk to steroid guys, and maybe a couple more on your ballot, that I could argue maybe should have been that 10th guy instead of Ryan Braun. I'll give you that name here in a bit. Here again, Mic Drop, John Perrotto, Mike Asti here, available everywhere you get your podcast, made possible by the Believe Network and also on SiriusXM. Another one that I wanted to get to, and this maybe is not nearly like as controversial as Ryan Braun in any way, because there are some people voting for this man, even though he didn't get in yet, and that is Chase Utley. He's at 59.1%, only his third year on the ballot, 251 overall votes. The way he is trekking, John, he's probably going to get in.
Oh, yeah.
It would really be hard to imagine he's not going to get in. But there are some that still don't, clearly, based on the numbers, don't think that he deserves it. And I do think part of maybe what hurts him, if you're talking about those Phillies teams that broke their title drought and won that championship in 08 and then also got there in 09. Ryan Howard, who's obviously not going to be a Hall of Famer, but he was an MVP during that time. Jimmy Rollins was an MVP during that time frame. They are kind of the faces of that Phillies era. And Chase Utley was a great player, but kind of the third chair in terms of marketable assets under those two, regardless of where their careers finished. And of course, Chase Utley also had a postseason run and many years with the Los Angeles Dodgers at the end, where he was very productive as well. He finishes with 259 home runs, 1,025 RBI. He never won an MVP, but was an all-star several times, again, in the shadow of Ryan Howard and Jimmy Rollins. His hit total very, very high. The counting numbers aren't always there, but 64.6 for wins above replacement on Baseball Reference. That is very, very high for somebody not in the Hall of Fame right now at 64.6. He does have 154 stolen bases, so there's versatility there. The OBP of 358, the slug of 465, the OPS at 823. Those are numbers that people look to a lot more than even the hits and home runs and RBI that I mentioned at the top. So the counting numbers are not there. The analytics are all there. I wouldn't mind him getting in. I know you voted for him. So separate even from your case for him, because obviously I'd imagine the metrics helped get him there for you. Why do you think he's not getting enough love that while I think he's eventually going to get in, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 ballots from now from 59.1%, at least maybe 2 more from now. I don't know if he gets in next year. That'd be a pretty big jump to go about 16%. Is that uncommon to go? It usually we see people go 5% or so up every given year. People think they're probably going to be deserving it. So why do you think your colleagues are going to make this man wait several more years still?
That's a good question.
There's no steroid accusations really.
Underrated as a player. Nobody ever talked about him when they said, hey, he's one of the top 10 players in the game. Right. But again, here's where some experience of being able to actually talk to people who were around him. And I remember even asking him this question when he played, why are you so underrated? And he said, well, that's not for me to say. I don't write the headlines. I don't cover the games. I'm not doing the Fox broadcast or what have you. But I covered a lot of the Phillies of that era for I was doing a lot of stuff for USA Today and Baseball Prospectus at the time. So I was around, certainly not every day, but enough that I kind of developed some relationships with some of the players there. And, like you said, Ryan Howard he had a lot of good years, but he had the monster year where he had 58 homers. And, Jimmy Rollins had the one big year where he was MVP. Utley never had that huge year, but he had a lot of really, really good years. And if you talk to people on the Phillies, and again, and I realize all the voters weren't fortunate enough to be in the position I was, especially for about a 5 or 6 year stretch where you got to talk to a cross section of people in baseball. But to a man, they would say, Utley makes us go. Chase Utley is the engine here. And he, maybe he never won an MVP, and maybe he's not a guy that's getting a lot of national publicity. And part of
his
that
best finish was 7th.
He was a very quiet and humble guy. Not a bad guy, not anti-media or anything like that. He just didn't like to blow his own horn. That was just his personality. He wasn't a guy that felt he had to be out there front and center, that he was fine. He just, wanted to contribute and win. And the publicity really did not matter to him. But to me, and again, talking to people from that era, be it Charlie Manuel, be it Pat Gillick or Ruben Amaro Jr. as the GMs at that time, they all said, and the players and Rollins and Howard and everybody else from those teams, Jason Worth, just to name a few, would all say the same thing. Chase is the guy that he's the engine of this team, and we wouldn't win without him. And he's our most valuable player in and out of the clubhouse, because he might not have been a vocal guy with the media. And I don't think he was necessarily a vocal guy that got up and just stood up and rallied the team around in a circle for a clubhouse meeting. But I do think the way he conducted himself and the way that he played the game, I think that was a great example for those teams.
Yeah, he definitely was a key figure of those teams for sure. Something that maybe also goes against him, even though he was in a lot of postseason series. But when you're a borderline guy, only hit 220 something in the playoffs. He really would dip in the postseason. He didn't have any great postseason series. There's no
Well, the
moment
one
there.
he did, and they lost in
Yeah, they
09.
lost.
Home
Yeah,
runs
that's
against
true.
the Yankees, but they lost, so that kind
Yeah,
of got lost in the shuffle. Yeah,
it gets lost in the shuffle. The Dodgers, he had the one in 2015, he had 333, but the rest of them he was hitting in the hundreds, and he didn't even get a hit at all during their 2017 World Series run, despite being on the team. And yeah, you did mention that he had the one in 2009 where he was hitting 296 in the postseason, but the year they won the World Series, he hit 220. The year before that, when they kind of begun that run, he only hit 182 in the playoffs. But to be fair, I mean, Barry Bonds, Willie Mays, like they weren't great in the postseasons either, in many postseason series. But that could go against a borderline guy. And then in the regular season, despite being that steady force, he only hit 275 overall. Those things are probably going against him. I think he'll eventually get there. Again, John Perrotto here joining me on Mic Drop, talking through the Baseball Hall of Fame selection of Andrew Jones, Carlos Beltran, and Jeff Kent. They're going to be the three this year. And then Perrotto's ballot himself. Again, we're going to get to the steroid guys here in a moment. One more. Well, so we talked about Felix. We talked about K-Rod. Well, K-Rod, yeah, Francisco Rodriguez. So he's another one. Just the high save total is hard to ignore. Is that just really it? If you're gonna be putting guys in because in opening up the door for relievers, and 400 plus saves are going to get you in. We saw Wagner get in mostly because of that high save total and then his ERA overall. If you're putting Wagner in, you got to put in K-Rod. They seem similar. And Kenley Jansen is a current player that look where he's going to end up.
Yeah.
Former Pirate in Chapman. Look where he's going to end up. So I mentioned bigger Hall of Fames. If you want in Wagner, that should make it for K-Rod. And then if you do get K-Rod, these other guys are going to – Kenley Jansen's going to be a really underrated case if you look at where that save total is going to be. Is that just it? That save total is hard to ignore?
It is hard to ignore, but also you look at – and again, like you look at the peak. And and I know he became a journeyman for a while, but even when he was bouncing from team to team to team – he was still pretty darn good. I mean, it wasn't like just hanging on as like a mop-up reliever. I mean, he still was key parts of bullpens really to the time his career ended. But you look at that peak in Anaheim, and I realize saves a lot of time are predicated on no more than you happen to play on a team that year that played in a lot of close games.
He set the record.
But he did have 62 saves that year. In 08 for the Angels. And I mean, that really stands out, but he had some other big save seasons. And, I asked Trevor Hoffman this once when Trevor was still active. And, it was fun. There still were hardly any relievers in the Hall of Fame at this point. It seemed like the door was shut. You had Gossage, you had Suter, but you really didn't have many Hall of Famers, like John Franco was on the ballot. And I believe he dropped off his first year. And, And I asked Trevor Hoffman, I said, to me, closers are hard to evaluate. I said, what do you think is the hallmark of a really good closer? And I mean, Trevor Hoffman was pretty darn good. He says it's second most things in baseball history. And he didn't even get into his third year. I mean,
had the record at one
point. He wasn't a first ballot guy. Yeah, he took him 2-3
years. Let's put it this way, John. I think we would agree here. You put him on the Yankees instead of the Padres, he's walking in first ballot.
No doubt.
And Mariano Rivera, I mean, obviously Mariano Rivera is the GOAT and deserved to be go in right away. But that felt like a little bit of, you had a World Series appearance, but your teams weren't good most of those times. You were compiling saves, whereas Mo was doing it in the postseason all those years. That felt like it. I mean, that's not Hoffman's fault to not be on the Yankees or not be on a dynasty. But that feels like that held that against him because his total was so high that if you're going to put any reliever in, it's him and Rivera.
Absolutely. But I asked him what his criteria was. And I thought, here's a guy who the top at the time was, the best reliever in the National League. Rivera was the best reliever in the American League. This is going back, I don't know, mid-2000s. We had this conversation. He was still with the Padres. And I asked him, I said, what in your mind constitutes a great closer? And we talked about how it was just hard to really gauge what relievers should be in and shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. And he told me something interesting. And I mean, he said 30 save seasons. He goes, I think if you save 30 games in a year, you're a pretty darn good reliever. He goes, now I've had some years where, I've had more, in the 40s, and he had the 1 year with 51, I believe, 51 of 52 in saves. But he said, if I get the 30 saves, then I feel I've had a good year.
You're happy. Okay.
Yeah.
So you do that 5-10 years in a row.
Yeah.
You're clearly on a different level. And that's, again, going to be it'll be interesting how Kenley Jansen's handled, how K-Rod's eventually handled here the rest of his time on the ballot, how these guys are handled with that high total. And again, Wagner did get in, didn't have the 600 plus, but had 400 plus and did it as a flamethrower. And him getting in, I feel like opens up the door even more. But if you're going to let DHs get in, if you're going to let every position get in, and you're going to do it if being the best at certain positions like David Ortiz and Edgar Martinez were as a DH, that was controversial years ago, of course. If you're going to let positions in, you're going to go allow relievers to get in, then it can't just be Rivera. Like, you don't just have one. You got to go to guys that are deserving. So one that you didn't vote for that is brought up a lot is Cole Hamels. He is somebody that there's a lot of people out there that think that modern day wise, he maybe should garner more respect despite a low win total. He had 23.8% of the vote on his first year on the ballot, 101 total votes. I don't see him as somebody that you voted for. So you didn't, I don't think you voted for him. Why did you hold back on Hamels? Because metric and analytic wise, his wins above replacement, for example, is kind of high. His win total is really low. And I mean, I guess you can argue how many times was he the ace of the staff, but what held you back on Hamels? There are some, and more than you would think, voting for him now.
Yeah. And I mean, he clearly was a good pitcher. I mean, he was one of the best in the league for a while, no doubt.
Right.
I'm kind of caught in the purgatory like I was with relievers, kind of between the old school, like, well, those guys only pitch an inning, or even the older guys like Gossage, pitched 3 innings. They didn't pitch 7 innings like starters did then, or 8 innings. I'm kind of caught in that purgatory where kind of the old school stats still matter to me, which is why I vote for Andy Pettitte with 255 wins. And I still have a hard time thinking somebody and my thinking is probably going to change on this in the next 10 years as more and more develop statistics and metrics and things. I just look at Cole Hamels' win total, and I know that wins aren't.
Yeah, we talked about Skeens. If Skeens plays the whole career at the Pirates, what's that win total going to look like? It's not going to be great, right?
Exactly. But I don't know. To me, Hamels just comes up short. I mean, I think he's legitimately someone to consider. He certainly wasn't somebody I looked at and went, no, this guy's.
But you're a bigger Hall of Fame guy. You're willing to go 10.
And I've changed that too. I've evolved. I didn't used to be when I first started. I'm sure there were some years if I went back and found all my ballots, and it's been so long, it's kind of hard to remember exactly what years, how many people I voted for. But I'm sure there were some years where I probably voted for 5, maybe even 4. So I've always been a 10 guy, and I'm still not necessarily a 10 guy. I didn't vote for 10 guys last year. I didn't. And,
they got to deserve it. I hear you. He's just interesting to me because I am somebody in my generation that I do like somebody that we are ignoring the win-loss record a little bit if they're a solid player, and it's because it's the same thing with the win total for a hockey goaltender. Really, like for my money, you could argue Dominic Hasek being the GOAT. Doesn't even have 400 career wins. Is it his fault that he couldn't get some of these wins? The year that he had all the stacked Hall of Famers in Detroit, he won 40 plus games. No other year did he have that. So it is a team game. Baseball is a team game. Hockey's a team game. These are all team games. And we've seen it with Paul Skeens in Pittsburgh. You could lose a game 1-0. You can lose a game 2-1. You pitched well. There's no way to deny it. And his win totals was hurting him. However, Felix Hernandez's vote total, even Pedro Martinez getting in as quickly as he did, obviously was a dominant, legendary pitcher, deserves it. But those win totals are low. I mean, that's below the 250 bar. That's below a lot of bars that people used to say it had to be 300 or nothing, and now it's 250 or nothing. That helped CC Sabathia. Voters have admitted that him getting over 250 helped him walk in right away.
Yeah.
Is that really a difference of two or three wins that you would have made him wait a year? Those things annoy some, but Cole Hamels' total is so low. But I do kind of like that we are forgetting the win total a little bit because it's not fair to the individual player. He was on great teams, didn't have a high win total. That's a bit odd. I think one thing that maybe hurts Cole Hamels for me, aside from the win total, which isn't his fault, is his career ERA is almost 4. So it's not that great. For a guy that's trying to get in with a low win total, it's going to be a rough road. It's exactly 3.43. So it's halfway to almost 4. Like, that's not that fantastic. I mean, Pedro Martinez is way better than that, and he walked right in despite a lower win total, and obviously the moments that he put forth. So if the ERA is going to be well over 3 and your win total is going to be low, you're going to have a tough time, even if I think you're a solid pitcher. Now, one I do want to offer to you is maybe who could have been a part of your 10 instead of Ryan Braun, and I think this is going to be a test case. And it's been low. It's been not working for maybe what Andrew McCutchen will do in the future, is Torrey Hunter. 10 Gold Gloves, arguably the greatest defensive center fielder in the American League when Andrew Jones maybe was in the National League. You can certainly throw Griffey in there, but Torrey Hunter defensively might even have been better than Junior, and their careers didn't exactly parallel, but a great defensive center fielder. The 10 Gold Gloves is a really, that's an historic number. Clemente has the 12, but 10, Andrew Jones, Griffey, like that's an historic number. Usually gets you into Cooperstown. He does have over 400 home runs. He has some things that deserve him more consideration than he's even getting. I'm not saying he has to necessarily get in. I could see why he's a borderline case, but he only got 37 votes and 8.7% of the vote in his 6th year on the ballot. So we're not talking one of his first couple years where people might not want him to wait. I know there are some that think Andrew McCutchen maybe will have a chance if he keeps on playing a little bit longer. He does have an MVP that Torrey Hunter does not have. I don't see how McCutchen's going to be able to argue if Torrey Hunter's vote total is so low, and you didn't include him on your ballot and you went 10. Why not Hunter for you? Why not more maybe love for Hunter, in your opinion, from even other voters out there? His numbers are not that far away from Beltran and Andrew Jones, but he is getting vote totals that are very far from them as they now got inducted.
Well, if you took personal feelings into effect, he would have been on my ballot because Torrey's one of the all-time good guys in baseball, and
I've heard that a lot.
Really enjoyed getting
to
know him over the years, especially his best days in Minnesota. That's a hard one. He just, to me, doesn't pass muster. But again, Andrew Jones got 7%, and my perception changes, and maybe the longer it goes, the more I realize that he was probably a better player than I gave him credit for. But I don't know. I just
1,391 RBI is very, very high. 1,391 RBI. His slugging percentage is 461, which is right around where even some power slugging center fielders. His wins above replacement is lower than Beltran and Andrew Jones for sure, and kind of significantly at 50.6. But by the way, that's higher than Ryan Braun's. And I know the positions weren't the same, but 50.6. I mean, it's not great, but I think I don't necessarily know if I would flip a chair if Torrey Hunter never gets in, and he's not ever going to get in. Clearly, it just seems like that's a low number. 8.7. I don't know. Maybe he'll get reevaluated on another committee in the future. I'm skeptical that he's going to get in, but the 10 Gold Gloves is something too.
I think what the Andrew Jones election last night showed. You never count anybody out. He got 7.5% of the vote.
Yeah.
I said, I thought about him, but I dismissed him pretty much out of hand when he first came on the ballot. Yeah. And I do think, and here's another thing that factors into this, and I don't want to go too far off the rails here in our conversation, but 10 years ago, MLB.com writers were first admitted in the BBWA, and it was a very controversial decision. They are employees of the league. I wasn't necessarily, and it's nothing personal. Some of my
it's a different thing than when you're employee of the league.
I didn't vote for. I did not think that they should be in our association. I thought it should be more independent journalists, but the world has also changed a lot in the 39 years I've been doing this, which I guess I just committed to this season. But anyway, I think you have I kind of lost my train of thought here. You kind of have a new breed of voter that joined the voting ranks this year.
Sure.
You know, a lot of those MLB.com writers who have qualified have grown up in the analytics era. They're in their 30s, they're in their 40s. They're not like me. I'm 62, you know, so I kind of was in a different era when I first started covering baseball. And I do think that is why you have seen some of these guys this year, particularly
Beltran and Jones are analytic guys,
or like the
100%.
Felix Hernandez. Now, to me, I think
Analytic
Felix
guy.
is short of the Hall of Fame. I think he was a heck of a pitcher. He was a tremendous interview. He's funny as heck.
It's a similar bag of Cole Hamels. To me, you can't put Cole Hamels in and not Felix Hernandez. I mean, Felix Hernandez has the Cy Young Award, but yeah, do you care about win total or not? The younger people do not care about the win total. They look at the metrics a lot. It helped Andrew Jones. It helped Beltran. It will help Felix Hernandez, you would imagine. But oddly enough, it's not helping Torrey Hunter at all. And his wins above replacement is not nearly Andrew Jones or Carlos Beltran, but I think his resume is better than his percentage, I guess, is simply what I'm saying. I mean, but I could see him not getting there. But yeah, a lot of this has changed for sure. And he would just be that one to throw out there. And I do want to ask you before we get into the steroid guys, and then I'm going to let you go. And I mentioned that if Torrey Hunter is not getting any love and Jim Edmonds has a 2.5% clip and then drops off the ballot, we see Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran eventually get in, but their resumes and numbers and all that were even better over a more consistent time frame. Where are you in Andrew McCutchen? Obviously, you've seen this man in person. You've talked to him. He does have an MVP. To me, and I'm in Pittsburgh too, he's a real nice guy. I've covered the Pirates at times. I've been around him. He was the face of stopping the losing and getting into that postseason, that 13-15 run. 100% deserving for the Pirates Hall of Fame, no matter what else happens. He's a great guy. However, as somebody who looks into this, I don't see how Andrew Jones can have to wait 9 years, or Torrey Hunter can get below 9%, or Jim Edmonds gets 2.5%, and Andrew McCutchen is getting people's votes. Maybe he would get yours. He seems like a Hall of Very Good borderline guy to me. Do you think Andrew Jones, or not Andrew Jones, Andrew McCutchen deserves Hall of Fame right now? Do you need to see more from him? Does he get your vote as we speak?
I think about this subject more than you think I think about it, and especially now that he's.
I would bet it. He'll be on this ballot eventually, and this could be really that last guy to wear a Pirate hat. He's going to have the logo. If Bonds ever gets in, it's going to have a Giants hat on.
If this were 2016, 10 years ago, I would say undoubtedly he was going to end up in the Hall of Fame someday. But when he hurt his knee, he was still a good player, but he wasn't that elite player anymore. And, you know, this is a hard one for me because it's going to be hard not to have personal feelings on this one, especially. I mean,
I know.
I've known Andrew since 18 years old, and he got drafted, and I've known him for 21 years, whoever been now. I've seen him basically grow up in the game from when he was a kid just starting out the Gulf Coast League into now. And I have great affection for Andrew, and he has been wonderful to me over the years. I'd like to think we have a really good reporter-player relationship after this many years. And, boy, it's tough.
I don't know, John. He's a great guy. I agree with everything you're saying, and you've been around him more. He was even kind of important to me as somebody growing up in the area.
Sure.
He was the best player of my childhood. I mean, my 30s. I was real young in the early 90s teams. He was the one that, you know, helped me fall back in love with baseball when I kind of got disgusted with the Pirates franchise for so long, despite being somebody who loves and knows the game. And yet, I mean, when I even look into this even more as we're on this show, it makes me, you know, wince a little bit here. You look at Andy. So we just said that Torrey Hunter is not ever going to get in. You didn't put him on your ballot in which you voted for 10 guys. You think he's a borderline guy despite all the gold gloves. Torrey Hunter's wins above replacement is at 50. Andrew McCutchen is at 49 exactly. Andrew McCutchen has 1 gold glove. Torrey Hunter has 10. Andrew McCutchen does have an MVP, which Torrey Hunter did not even sniff, but Andrew McCutchen has that 1 MVP and a peak. And again, 1 gold glove, only a handful of all-star appearances, 5 actually, which is still kind of on the lower side of things, was top 5 in Rookie of the Year. Yeah. Last one was 2015, as you mentioned. It's been a decade plus where he's not even been near that game. His overall numbers in terms of the counting numbers, 332 home runs, 1,152 RBI, and his career batting average, despite being 300 plus during that peak year, and those peak years, but his career batting average is only a 271. So, John, I know there's the personal feelings. That resume is factually lower than Torrey Hunter for me outside of the MVP. That's the thing. And maybe Andrew McCutchen will hang on a little bit more. I don't know what else he can do. I mean, he's not going to have any more big years. I think he's done. I think he's going to always fall shy. And it'll be interesting if he does get more of the younger love, especially from this Pittsburgh chapter, because he is that guy of our youth. So especially having the MLB.com writers, I'd wonder he's probably going to get some votes, but I still don't think he gets near 75%. I just don't think
we have two writers in our chapter, and this isn't a bias thing because this is going back to long before they covered baseball and they were even professional sports writers who have the number 22 in their email address. There's two guys in our chapter. That's the kind of impact Andrew McCutchen's had on baseball fans here. If forced to have to vote for him today, I'd say no. I'm with you. I think he's short. And it's sad. I really wonder if he wouldn't have had that knee injury. I think we would be talking about a guy who was clearly a slam dunk to go in. But I think
if he could have got a few more All-Star appearances, certainly got to 400 home runs, maybe the Gold Gloves wouldn't even have mattered, but maybe one or two more would have helped. Yeah, the overall career hit total is over 2,000, which is nice. The doubles are there, 451 doubles. Those are things that are pros in his favor. He did win a Silver Slugger multiple times. That peak period, and the fact that he was a face of a franchise that was digging themselves out of the dirt, maybe those are things that will help him get some votes. He's a great guy for sure. Yeah. But even, again, the analytics of a 457 slug, 822 OPS, those maybe could help, but again, the wins above replacement's not there. The counting numbers aren't there. The peak years, I don't know if it's enough for the overall collective. So I think that's a no for me. John Perrotto here, mic drop with Believe in Sirius XM. And then last but not least, part of this discussion, and it is the discussion that everybody discusses, so I'm going to have to bring it to you here. You have made it clear that steroids means nothing to you in terms of voting for people, that if the resume is there, you watch them play, if they deserve it regardless of roids, you put them in. We don't need to go through everyone's stats. Obviously, that includes A-Rod, Manny Ramirez, the Bonds, the Clemens, who were on there before. I'd imagine that if you had your perfect world, that would have put McGuire, Sosa, Sheffield, all those other guys that maybe aren't to Bonds' level, but would have been in regardless, in as well. I know your thoughts on the morality police, and you don't want to, be a morality cop, so that's why. My counter to you would be twofold. One, is the steroid infraction simply an off-the-field morality issue, or does it creep on the field because it does enhance your performance? And as much as Bonds would be a deserving Hall of Famer regardless, for me at least, I don't think he'd have the single season or all-time home run record without ever taking steroids. The progression was not there. He did step up his game clearly with what I believe to be steroid use. It wasn't factually proven during his career once the testing came into be, but there are reports of an HGH failed test prior to it being an illegal thing. So I think everyone would kind of assume that he did do something. Game of Shadows, which was a reputable journalist that wrote that, gave a documented case on how he took steroids. But maybe I get the morality thing, but maybe it's more also, where would you, how would you counter that if it's also part of the game? I mean, there are people that are not getting put in, the Pete Roses, et cetera, that they believe that their betting, et cetera, hurt the actual game outcome and the integrity of the game. Does somebody taking steroids hurt the integrity of the game by increasing their numbers, especially when they didn't need to and they were already a great player? It did make them better players. I think that's hard to deny.
That's a hard question to answer, and I've debated this in my mind.
That's the fair counter, though, you have to admit. I mean, I'm not against him.
No. I'm not dismissing what you're saying by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
I don't know if we know how much, really. I don't know.
Okay. Is that the issue?
10% better, 20% better.
Do you agree that there's something, though, that Bonds was better on suspected steroids than prior? You saw him in the early 90s.
I would think
something happened. Like for you covered his whole career. Do you think he'd have the single season home run record without ever touching steroids? That was not his trajectory. He was a great player.
Probably not.
I think that's where some voters are bothered. That leave the records alone if you're going to do it with roids. I guess kind of is a thinking for some.
Well, it's a hard situation because, like, again, I don't know, and I know some people, this is not a novel idea on my part, but some have said maybe put it on their plaque prominently.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
That's where I was going to go, John. To be honest, I swear that you took it out of my mouth.
It's hard. I mean, look at football. Who knows how much some of these linemen, you see them, they were 315 when they played, and now they're like 205 when they're not playing.
I think it matters more.
We're not talking about football. I get that.
It matters more in baseball because people care about the numbers so much.
Yeah.
Even the casual fan, they know the numbers. Like I have ingrained in my head people's stats who are baseball legends. I know football. I'm in the Pro Football Writers Association. Maybe I'll get a Hall of Fame vote someday. I covered football for a long time in pro and college in my career. I don't have individual great players' numbers memorized like I do baseball. It's a stat-obsessed game. So if you taking steroids increases your stats, even if you already were a legend, that I think is the difference why it bothers people more. Because I'm not going to sit there and tell you that I don't think Ray Lewis or others probably use steroids. If you tell me that he used steroids, I would believe that. But I don't think people care if a linebacker gains 20% more muscle, but they do care if you go from 50 home runs to 73. Yeah. I think that's the issue. I think that's really where it is. And you took the words out of my mouth. Bonds has spoken out that he would be vehemently against the whole thing on the plaque. But what the plaque represents is documenting your accurate story. So I want to make this clear, despite being a younger voter and providing you the counter there. Bonds was a favorite player of mine growing up. I wouldn't have a problem with him necessarily being in the Hall of Fame. He was a great player, does deserve it. His bat, his artifacts are in Cooperstown. He's kind of already getting, some respect if you walk in those rooms. He just doesn't have a plaque on the wall. But I wouldn't have a problem if you put on the plaque, and we can even be factual to what we know. 7-time MVP, here's the numbers, and at the bottom, widely suspected of steroid use, or implicated in the book Game of Shadows of steroid use, or for A-Rod, suspended this many games. Manny Ramirez suspended this many games. Sammy Sosa, we uncovered the cork bat. Rafael Palmeiro, 500 home run, 3,000 hits. You can go to what was said and what was later known from Congress to testing positive. Put that on the plaque because you're telling the full-on story that if I take my grandkids in 50 years and these guys are enshrined as legends, they can read a plaque and say, well, this was a great player, but maybe he also took steroids, rather than me having to explain it. If that was a compromise levied in your room of Hall of Fame voters where that was ever discussed of, okay, John, you're lax on the steroid guys. We will come off of being so strict on them and maybe put them in, but we want it on the plaque. Would you scoff at that, or would you be okay with that?
I'd be okay with it. I would, because again, I just feel, I don't think these guys should be forgotten in time. They were major stars. They were big names in the sport, and I just don't think you can forget that. And I realize today that a lot of people want to cancel every kind of history and everybody, and I'm not getting political. I'm just saying how how some things that have happened here in the last 10 years. And I don't think you can cancel Barry Bonds. I don't think you can cancel A-Rod. I don't think you can cancel Roger Clemens or Manny Ramirez or, what have you. And again, I come back to the point, we can go round and round about this for 100
we could
days.
We could do a whole show on it. We're not going to do that here.
Podcast ever. Yeah. And I mean, but I guess what it all comes down to is I wish I never thrown in the middle of this mess in a way, because this wasn't my own doing, but I think they deserve to be recognized. And if you do,
there are some people that wish the game didn't come out. We don't know. There are some that would rather not know. There are 100%. There are some fans that have flat out said that they think it would be a better world if we just didn't know, even if they know they took steroids. That if Jose Canseco, and honestly, and I'll leave with this, John. And I don't know if you would vote for this man if he wasn't who he is, but if you look at the resume of Jose Canseco, that resume, if there was no whistleblower cloud, like if you're somebody that doesn't care about steroids, Jose Canseco's career resume would be more Hall of Fame worthy than some people realize.
Yeah.
That overall body, he ruined it himself by being the
He did.
whistleblower. He's never going to get any votes. He didn't get any votes. He's not getting near it on any committee. He'll never even, I don't even think they even want him to go. Like, he can't even attend with a ticket. But you look at where he was as a complete player. He was more of a complete player than Mark McGwire was when he was on those A's teams. You could argue he was the better player. He tailed off at the end, but you look at stolen bases, home run wise. I mean, the overall resume is comparable to some guys that we're debating here on this show. He's never going to get in, but that's just an interesting thing that, you know, he gets thrown to those wolves. But yeah, I mean, I would not, I kind of do want it on their plaque to tell the story. I don't know if that ever would occur. I know Bonds doesn't want that. We will see what happens with them. I don't think they're ever going to get in. And I imagine that A-Rod and Manny and those guys will be held in the same esteem, and it'll be the same situation for them as well. They won't get in with the writers. We'll see what happens with the other committee. And I'm skeptical there because Bonds, despite being integrated more into society, didn't really do well with the committee. So who knows? But he's still respected. His bat is still in there. And John, I appreciate the time for sure. I know you have to get out of here. Yep. You are a longtime voter. Your vote definitely matters. Hope to see you again sometime soon in the press box. And certainly at a Pirate game. And great talking with you, man.
Great talking to you too, Mike. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. John Perrotto, happy to do it. John Perrotto, longtime baseball writer, 39 years. Let's get him to 40 for sure. Longtime baseball writer, now works for a myriad of outlets. Long time there with the Beaver County Times and several others. Associated Press, Yardbarker, Roundtable Sports are some of those places that you can find his work today. And I don't fully agree with his ballot at all, no. But, I mean, he's definitely somebody that's putting in the work, talked to the guys, been covering the sport, has the knowledge, has the background. His ballot's worthy. He can definitely, you know, make the case for his guys. I don't know if he still didn't convince me on Ryan Braun, still didn't convince me on a few others. But again, you know, he has his say so and definitely deserves to have it. And we touched on a lot during this show. Don't normally like to have these pods be this long, but if you look back to the Will Graves show too, when we were talking Baseball Hall of Fame, as contentious as it always is, that's going to be the situation. So again, that'll do it for this episode of Mic Drop, made possible by Believe, available everywhere you get your podcasts and including SiriusXM. We will have shorter, more concise shows. We'll get more into football and other sports here in the coming days, weeks, and months. Maybe some baseball as well, as we aren't too far from pitchers and catchers reporting, by the way, and we'll see what goes on in the future. But at least I called it, and you can go back and read a Yardbarker article. I called it. It'd be Andrew Jones, Carlos Beltran, and maybe one other. Be a small Hall of Fame this year. I called it. The writers would put those two in and nobody else. And so I had it. I don't have a vote, but I had it. Again, thanks to John Perrotto. That was a great conversation. And I can't wait to see what his ballot looks like next year. Can't wait to see the ballot, what it looks like next year. Didn't go 10 2 years ago, went 10 this year. He's a deep Hall of Fame guy. We'll see what he does next year.